Well, it's year 4 of the New York Football Giants administration with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And honestly, I like Brian Daboll. I'm a little bit more skeptical of Joe Schoen. I have my concerns about him as a GM. Not because he hasn't been solid at drafting. Like, he's had some good moments. He's also had some concerning moments. I don't hold the Daniel Jones contract against him because it seems like that might have been Mr. Mara himself getting involved. And maybe he should learn not to. I don't know. I digress. I'm going to go ahead and focus more on what I know and less on what I don't know. What we do know, yes, is Joe Schoen let Saquon Barkley walk in free agency. I don't think that was the worst move that Joe Schoen ever did. Because honestly, again, like at that time, you have to look like yes, it doesn't help that Saquon went to the Philadelphia Eagles and then ran for 2,000 yards and got a Super Bowl. I think the concern is that I think you should have been able to see this coming long before that and found a trade partner with him that was not the Eagles and then hope that they extend him. And whether or not you get a third or a fourth round pick out of it, like again, they did get a compensatory pick because of Saquon walking in free agency. I don't know how they feel all that great about it. They actually also should have gotten another compensatory pick for Xavier McKinney walking in free agency, but then they decided to sign some guards and stuff like that. So there was some like they could have probably gotten better in a few different ways. They missed out on it seems like they might have missed out on a compensatory pick. Listen, I understand it hurts the fans to sit there and watch Saquon, and that's the other thing is there was a lot of talk I think post NFL season about how Saquon was a huge part of that offensive line room. Or not offensive line room, just that whole locker room, right? There was a lot of talk postseason, a lot of, like Saquon was the leader, and I think that they kind of missed out on not having that guy there. So Saquon going to the Eagles probably didn't help, knowing that you're not paying your starting players. I think a lot of that's all tied to the Daniel Jones contract and fixing that offensive line, which has been consistently a problem. And yeah, some of that goes back to, drafting Evan Neal over other players. I don't know if I hold all of that against them. Usually the first year of a draft for a lot of GMs is not great. You could look at a lot of GMs that you like around the NFL right now, and you could look at their first year of their drafting skills, and you'd be like, oh, this isn't just like this is like a first year problem for a lot of GMs because they are not established yet. They don't have all their guys in the building, the people that they trust in the building. So they're doing a lot more kind of catching up when they're hired. And I think that's a fair assessment. So I don't hold a lot of the first year stuff against them. The stuff that concerns me with Joe Schoen was the contract stuff, especially with guys who are on the, again, how they handled Saquon's contract. Like, oh, they were communicative with him. Like, okay, you could have just extended him. Like if you really wanted him back, like especially like they could have extended him instead of giving him the tag the first time. It would have cost him about the same as what they were offering him in the long run. Anyway, for Saquon's sake, I think it worked out better that he didn't end up sticking with the Giants. I'm sorry, Giants fans. For Giants fans' sake, listen, you know what? You got some running backs there now who I'm curious about, right? I'm a little Tyrone Tracy curious as long as he can hold on to the ball. I'm very Cam Skattebo curious. I love Cam Skattebo, man. I love watching his tape, man. I liked watching him just like, oh, yeah. He reminds me of Kareem Hunt. He kind of stays on the feet, makes guys feel pain. Good pass catcher out of the backfield. That's been a lot of the talk, by the way, by a lot of the beat reporters, is that Cam Skattebo might get a lot of play in the receiving game, which I like that guy in space, man. Like, you want to tackle him? He ain't going down. He ain't going down. Nah, I think that's kind of the fun part with those two guys. They're both kind of different body-typed running backs who both can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I'm kind of intrigued by that. Devin Singletary's there because he could pass protect. At least as of right now, he's the guy they know can pass protect. When we get into the season, when we get into, the camp and stuff like that, and they see, like that's why I think Cam Skattebo maybe immediately doesn't always get like a lot of reps up there, but like, man, I liked his tape. I liked it when they drafted him in the 4th round. And I think they're going to need to utilize that guy a little bit because they have Russell Wilson starting at quarterback. And if you heard my Steelers talk the other day, his kind of game plan is basically throw a touchdown or a check down, ancient West Coast system kind of style, especially because he can't see over the middle of the field a lot of the time. He did get a little bit better with that. I think you got to stick tall guys there. Theo Johnson, man, it's your time to step up. Let's talk about the receiving room, right? Because that's an interesting part of this team is the receiving room. Malik Neighbors, star power receiver. I think they're going to focus on making sure they get him the ball. I don't know if he's going to get as many targets as he got last year, but holy man, he as a guy who is a featured element of the offense, I am very excited to watch some more Malik Neighbors on Sundays, especially in New York or New Jersey, where they also tend to play. The Neighbors is just like, honestly, he feels like the second coming of Odell Beckham, and the problem is you're really hoping that they don't Odell Beckham him again. You're hoping this isn't just repeating history over and over and over. It doesn't seem like they could ever keep two star players on the field at the same time, right? That's always been the giant. It's like, like when they had Odell, like before Odell, they had Victor Cruz, and I mean Victor Cruz wasn't nearly Odell's level, but like Victor Cruz went down with the Achilles, or it was the patella tendon. He went down with some major tendon tear, and then he just never really came back from that. That was literally the same year Odell just went bananas. Odell went bananas and then kept going bananas. And it does feel like Malik Neighbors has a lot of that Odell element to him. The being able to get open at will, the movement skills, the ability to high point the ball, even though his size isn't necessarily like his big thing. Like he's not the biggest receiver in the world, but man, like he'll get up there. He gets vertical. So I like Malik Neighbors, and I don't know if there's anybody who doesn't like Malik Neighbors, unless they personally know him, in which case I'm not getting into that. The rest of the receiving core is interesting, right? Because I feel like this is a team that probably needed another piece there. They brought back Darius Slayton after trying to get rid of him all the time. Like, they were just like, hey, we'll take him for a pack of cigarettes. And now it's like, hey, we're going to pay you at least like some decent money now because like you actually showed that you can serve a role in our offense. And also we were expecting Jalen Hyatt to eventually like take a step forward. You know, we've had 2 years of him. We don't know where he's going to be on this, this team going into the year. Speaking of Jalen Hyatt, a lot of good talk coming from Russell Wilson about Jalen Hyatt, which that's kind of a good thing because that's the kind of guy who Russell Wilson seems to work well with is the, bigger, faster receivers. I think Jalen Hyatt has some of that to him that where it's like, if you get, like, I think you're going to really need to build this offense around the deep ball with Russell Wilson, and you have a lot of speed on this offense with Darius Slayton, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt. You can run four verts, and you're going to keep the guys back, and that's what the value of having those running backs who catch out of the backfield. The tight end room, not as sexy, right? Like, it's fun. Like, I think there's a lot of people expecting a big bump forward from Theo Johnson in year 2. That could definitely be the case. He's got the size where I'm kind of intrigued by it. He has the pass catching, like, pieces there. Like, we could do something with this and, like, match it up to what Russell Wilson or eventually rookie Jackson Dart or Jameis Winston can do. And we'll talk a bit about that quarterback room because it's a lot of a quarterback room. A lot of playing time, and then also a first-round rookie QB, which I actually didn't mind that draft pick. And we'll talk a bit about like how that process went out because, going into the offseason, we knew they weren't going to have Daniel Jones because they cut him during the season last year. I think that was still too late, but hey, that's just me. I think Daniel Jones is like Ryan Tannehill 2.0. I've been saying it. When he's not healthy and you're paying him too much, he's not worth it anymore. You need pieces around him. You need an offense around him that very much works to what he does, and it's not going to be efficient. It's not going to be fun. You need a good running back. You basically need everything else working for you, and that's just like and you need everything else working for you to be mid. That's the problem with Daniel Jones. That's the problem with Ryan Tannehill, right? That was their issues, is that when they weren't able to utilize their legs and be part of that kind of an offense, they hit the mid. That's why I think Daniel Jones actually does end up with another starting job eventually, because if you don't have to pay him, if you're paying him less than, the problem is you're paying him $40 million in a time where Baker Mayfield was getting 33. I think Baker Mayfield's shown way more in the NFL than Daniel Jones ever did. And even at that point in time, like Daniel Jones at the time they gave him $40 million was not worth $40 million. They could have tagged him, gave him the franchise tag, and it was $33 million. That was why that was a dumb contract, a dumb extension. And I don't know who I hold that against at this exact moment. I don't even know who they were competing against, to be honest. If they let him walk in free agency, who was he going to? The Panthers? I digress. Let's address some of the other issues as far as the quarterback room and the offense. I thought the quarterback situation was interesting because I was intrigued by who they were going to go after in free agency because, we saw them kick the tires on Aaron Rodgers. I thought maybe they would trade for Gardner Minshew because if you watched the HBO Hard Knocks thing last year, they were intrigued by Gardner Minshew. They were also intrigued by Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold waved bye-bye to them a long time ago. Because he had some connection with Clint Kubiak, who is the OC over in Seattle. So I think that was never going to happen. Aaron Rodgers was an interesting one because he would have gotten to stay in New Jersey. We now know he went with the Steelers, but he still has a house in Montclair, right? So that would have been a nice little situation, not having to change your commute or anything like that. I think that would have worked very well for Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood. And again, probably would have been easier to bring in dudes for him to line up with. And I think he has a good opinion of Brian Daboll, which is why I even took the meeting, right? In the end, it didn't work out. There were other dudes I thought they might be interested in, but they just never lined up for them. Jimmy Garoppolo as probably as a bridge QB. I think he's just been like, you know what, man? I get to hang out in LA behind Matt Stafford. I get paid to hold a clipboard. This is one of the issues with Jimmy Garoppolo, even when he was with other teams. You heard about it with the Patriots. Martellus Bennett was like, that guy wasn't always he's like the opposite of Baker Mayfield. He's not going to go in if he has a ding on his kneecap or something. He was just he was very quick to kind of pull himself out. And listen, I don't hate on that. I think there's some coaches who like that. They're Kevin Stefanski's of the world, Kyle Shanahan's like that. The Robert Saleh's of the world would like a guy who wants to go in and I have to pull you out, right? That's my job. My job is for you not to want to go in, and I'm gonna yank you back. That's my job, dude. I want you to want to go in, and that's how I want my players to act. And I like that kind of mentality. I'm protecting you from you. You go ahead and be you. I like that, and that's what I think that's another kind of spectrum of quarterback and player in the NFL. You saw it last year with Anthony Richardson. He got a lot of flack for taking himself out of a game or a rep because he was winded and running around. So I'm going to go back to this whole thing of the list of quarterbacks, though. Didn't seem like they were interested in Minshew. Minshew ended up going to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think that kind of got dragged out a bit. Justin Fields, I was intrigued by going to the Giants because, again, I felt like whatever you did with Daniel Jones, you could do with Justin Fields, but it's but with a souped-up version. That's why I've always liked Justin Fields. It's why I kind of like the signing for the Jets. I thought he actually fit very well for the Giants. But in the end, it didn't go that way. It's fine. We'll talk about him and the Jets on another show, probably the next one that I do on this. There were a lot of options. I think the only other one I was really intrigued by was, they probably could have gotten Mac Jones for a pack of donuts or whatever. Same thing with Jacoby Brissett. I don't think they were looking for guys. Jacoby Brissett would have been an interesting one. Mac Jones, I think they were worried that, maybe there'd be some infighting or whatever, and maybe it wasn't the guy for the locker room. He ended up going to the Niners, and it does seem like they like him a lot, at least in the locker room. And they already have an established starter in Brock Purdy. I think the issue being that you want somebody who has been set up. So Russell Wilson came, and they also brought in Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston is not one of my favorite quarterbacks as far as wanting him to be my team starter, but one of my favorite quarterbacks in watching him play. He's also not my favorite quarterback as far as off-field personality in the past. Has had some issues, and including he kind of burnt himself out of Cleveland, a team that needed a quarterback going into this year, and they did not want him back. It was very clear they did not want him back. And that they were not interested in bringing him back. He was captain interception. Now, to be fair, they brought back Flacco. Flacco's not the interception guy, but the difference being Flacco came off a bench. It came off a couch to go to the bench to play for the Browns and ended up getting him to the playoffs. Whereas Jameis Winston came from being in camp all season, getting chemistry with the players, and throwing interceptions. And listen, I get it. There's always going to be times where you question, hey, he's still a little rusty or whatever else. Winston has that kind of the crab legs, eat a W. I'm not always a huge fan of that, rah-rah, oh, yeah, hoo-ha, he. He's a very weird dynamic between him and Russell Wilson, and you're seeing it in somehow the coaches versus the players talk about the players. I don't remember which player it was, but they were on an interview and they felt very more drawn to Winston because I think sometimes people like that element of it, like the goofiness. Whereas, like, I think Winston and Wilson are both kind of have different levels of weirdness to them. Like, I think, Wilson kind of comes off a little fake, I think, to a lot of people, and listen, I think everybody's going to have people that they mesh with and they don't mesh with. That's just reality. I think Wilson's the better quarterback. He always has been. I don't think there's ever been a day where Winston was better than Wilson. It might come. It might be a day where that happens because I think as Wilson has lost his mobility, his ability to extend plays and see the full field has kind of gone down. I think Winston, the problem is his ability to see the field even when he's standing up and has already had his LASIK done. He's still not a great quarterback. He likes to throw a lot of interceptions. He's very much a YOLO guy, which makes it fun to watch from the sideline when it's not your team. If you're a Giants fan, you might be excited in the beginning because you'll watch him throw 500 yards and 5 touchdowns to Malik Neighbors, but then the next week you'll see them lose by 30 points because he threw 3 pick sixes. So he's a guy who threw 30 interceptions in a season. I would not be super excited to watch him be a long-term starter, but as a guy in the locker room, I don't know if it's a terrible thing to have him there. And actually, Jackson Dart looks like he's kind of becoming a fun dude in that locker room as well. I'm starting to see why teams were intrigued by him, even though, again, I think the thing with the Jackson Dart thing, it didn't cost you much. Like, yes, he was a first-round pick, but it was your second-round pick, really, and you traded up. And I thought the price for trading up to get Jackson Dart wasn't that bad. He, yes, they drafted him over Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot to be talked about with Shedeur Sanders as far as how he did in the meetings and whether teams liked him or liked how he fit in the offense and, how you handle those interviews. And, again, I think maybe having an agent would have helped him with that. But clearly the Giants, who did a lot of homework on him, just were not sold. And they met with him at the East West Shrine Bowl. They sent people to his games. So they did not like Shedeur Sanders, at least as far as a fit in New York. Now he's with the Cleveland Browns as their second rookie QB. We'll see how that plays out. Jackson Dart, they liked him at the Senior Bowl. It seems like he made a really good impression there, and that was kind of the start of it. And listen, we'll see what ends up playing out. It seemed like he had some good reps and some good reps in the offseason so far at minicamp, and then some when he started taking reps with the twos and the ones, it maybe started looking a little bit more rough for him as you were playing against tougher competition. That's going to happen. Like, he's learning the playbook. He's learning the NFL. He's learning NFL speed. And that's the difference between him, Wilson, and Winston. These are all guys who have – and they signed Winston when Winston was kind of like, hey, like, this is covering our bases to make sure that if we miss out on Wilson and we miss out on Rodgers and we miss out on a quarterback in the first round, we have somebody. So I thought that wasn't a bad signing. I wouldn't be shocked if they end up trading Jameis Winston at some point, whether it's to the Saints. Depends on how they feel about Jackson Dart and whether he can go as the QB too. A dude who has some mobility, but is coming off of an offense that didn't really require, a lot from their quarterbacks. So I'm very intrigued to see where that QB room ends up going and developing. This is going to be one of the longer shows, obviously. Offensive line. Let's talk about the offensive line for the Giants, because that's been a problem for them since ever. It doesn't ever feel like it's ever complete. Like, they'll get one or two good pieces, right? Like, right now you see Andrew Thomas, although he's been injured a couple of times the last 2 years. But when he's healthy, he plays really well. He developed after a few years. Evan Neal, both kind of having a slow development and some injury concern, but we saw some good run blocking from him last year. So, there's talk that he's going to be competing at right guard. I think that might be an interesting one, especially after watching Mekhi Becton play very well at right guard for the Eagles. Granted, surrounded by a lot of good players for him too. That's a team that's developed a lot of good players. Listen, I'm talking well about the Eagles on a show. Sorry. The Super Bowl champs. I digress. I'm not an Eagles fan, by the way. But you look at the rest of that offensive line, last year they made some signings. Some of them I liked, right? Like, I liked Jermaine Illuminor. I think he was worth every penny they spent on him. He's a solid tackle who, could play right tackle for him, could play left tackle for him. Very good swing guy. So if you have Evan Neal and Illuminor going, I think that's a good thing. And then you need to fill out the inside of the roster. I wasn't a huge fan of the Runyon signing. I'm going to be honest. I didn't think that was a smart signing at all. I thought there were other guys that could have signed that were a little bit better. They did get Greg Van Roten to come back at 34 years old. It gives you coverage in case like Evan Neal doesn't end up winning the job, but now at least you have a competition there for right guard. You also have depth for left guard. So I don't hate it. I wish they would have maybe looked into maybe some other players. They did draft a dude in the 5th round, Marcus Mbo out of Purdue, so maybe he gets in on the competition. They also have guys who've had opportunities to take reps away and just hasn't worked out. The center, John Michael Schmitz, I kind of thought he was going to be I thought he would have taken a step forward sooner, but we're in year 3. Maybe having some consistency, if they can all stay healthy for a minute or two and some consistency around them, maybe it can end up being a little bit better going forward, and maybe we see a step forward in year 3 of this offensive line, at least for the center there. We already talked a little bit about the wide receiving room. I only talked about Neighbors and Darius Slayton. They still have Wan'Dale Robinson, still basically a role player, slot guy, not doing a lot. And it does sound like he's going to have a role going into the season. And we did talk about Hyatt, so I just wanted to touch on Wan'Dale, because Wan'Dale has that ability to kind of be like, listen, like if you're not running Neighbors out of the slot, you can stick Wan'Dale in there and he can kind of like operate in the middle of the field or whatever. I don't think Wan'Dale's a good match though for what Russell Wilson does, because short receiver, short quarterback, big offensive line, you have a wall in front of you. It makes it a little hard to go ahead and utilize those dudes, in my opinion. That's why I think like shorter quarterbacks work better with taller receivers or downfield threats, because they get to hit those, they could see that part of the field way better. It's why Baker Mayfield did better when he had Mike Evans, in my opinion, or at least part of the reason why. Tight end room, just touch on it really quick. Dan Bellinger, in year 3. Chris Manhertz has played pretty solid for them. So again, they have an okay tight end room. There's not anybody with real star power unless Theo Johnson takes a step forward. The thing that's exciting about this team, let's talk about the excitement of the New York Giants. This defense. I like this defense. I like it a lot. I was already a big fan of Dexter Lawrence. I've seen Dexter Lawrence in person, and he makes big people look tiny. So, and that's always been my selling point on Dexter Lawrence. Like, dude, that guy not just plays well, he's a mountain. He makes the mountain look small from Game of Thrones. But yeah, so you have a defense that's built around Dexter Lawrence, and like he went out for a little bit of an injury last year. So like even like, this defense showed moments earlier in the season and then kind of like buckled due to injuries. But you look at the depth that this team has. You have Kayvon Thibodeau, who, they did the 5th-year option with him. So they're going to have him at least for the next 2 years. And again, solid edge rusher. He hasn't developed into like a star, but like, I think that's a good piece to keep for the time being, especially now that you drafted Abdul Carter at 3 overall. I think that's an amazing piece to have in your team. To have that rotation of Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. They did bring in Chauncey Golston and Roy Robertson Harris, so they have some depth pieces there on the D-line too. You look at round 3 D tackle that they drafted in Darius Alexander. Again, another piece to have a running mate to go along with Dexter Lawrence, and maybe he develops as a good 3 tech to help, again, just kind of push the pocket. I like what they've done with this defensive line. And then you look at corner, right? Andrew Phillips is already, in year 2, but like they drafted him in the 3rd round last year. He played very well at slot corner. So I think that's already a good solid sign that you have one piece that you drafted in the 3rd round a year ago, and he's already played pretty well at a time when the rest of the defense was not super playing well, right? Like they did lose Xavier McKinney a year ago. Like they've needed to kind of fix that safety room a little bit. Well, guess what? They brought in Javon Holland. I think that was a very good signing. Tyler Nubin's going to be in year 2. He played pretty well last year as a replacement for Xavier McKinney. Not to the Xavier McKinney level. Also a little bit different of a defense with the D coordinator coming back with I can't remember the guy's name. I have it somewhere on one of these lists that are all over the place, but he didn't. You're not with the old Baltimore Wink Martindale, not there anymore. Year 2 of this defense, you're hoping there's a little bit more consistency there. A lot of guys now who are aware of what they have to do, their roles in the defense. I think that's going to be a good thing. You look at they signed Paulson Adebo in free agency to go along with the Javon Holland signing. I mean, now you're just you're building up that back area, right? You're making it hard to throw in this team. You have what's his name? Cordell Flott, who, again, guy they drafted a few years ago, again, another third-round corner. This is kind of like where I like to draft the corners, like the round 2, round 3 range, kind of like what the Bucs did as well, where you take your shots on them, and maybe they develop, and maybe they end up just being a slot guy, maybe they end up being an outside guy, but it gives you options. Paulson Adebo was a former, I think it was like a second or third-round pick for the Saints, played pretty well, had an injury. Now he's coming into free agency, and he gets a signing by the Giants, and I think, again, that gives you another piece to build up on that defense, right? You now have guys who you now feel very comfortable with. Javon Holland, who played very well a few years ago at free safety, didn't play super well the last 2 years under this Vic Fangio style defense, but maybe under this iteration of the defense under the Giants, I think he might have a little bit more, I think, value for what the Giants do compared to a defense that's more of that, quarter high kind of, the 2 safety high defenses. I think he has a lot more value as a single high free safety playmaking dude, where maybe you're also blitzing a bit and sending multiple rushers and trying to get guys off their game a little bit. Single high free safety kind of dude. Tyler Nubin, very versatile running mate with Holland, very good as a box safety, could also drop back and be too high if they want to run a lot too high. And then they also have Dane Belton, who, again, versatile guys, played all around as far as their safety room goes. They got to get something out of Deonte Banks, you're hoping anyway. As the opposite guy to Adebo, if he has to compete with Flott a little bit to be the outside guy. But, I mean, Belton's got to step up. I mean, not Belton. Yeah, Deonte Banks. Deonte Banks has to step up. First round pick, hasn't played well the last 2 years, but again, development happens in the NFL. It's not always linear. So maybe we see something out of Deonte Banks, and maybe they get something very valuable out of him. Now you have a safety room that seems like it's very solid. Other defensive backs that are very good. And also a front seven that I think is very, very potent with Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, who, man, I don't think he gets talked about enough about how good Brian Burns is. To go along with Dexter Lawrence, like the pressure that front seven can create, especially with those 4 or 5 guys that are there. And that's not even just to talk about the depth that they have from the guys that they signed, who are, again, like guys I wasn't super excited about, but again, good depth guys. And then you also have, the Toledo dude who, if he takes a step forward sooner than you're expecting as a third-round rookie, again, you have a very potent defensive front. Linebacking room, again, like this is one of the Micah McFadden, maybe they get a step forward from him again this year. Bobby Okereke ended up being a very good signing for them, and I think is going to be kind of like the one good part of that linebacking room. Again, like I said it before, I'll say it again. If you're going to be a little weak at a spot, linebacker, if you have one good linebacker, that's valuable. That's valuable in today's NFL. If you have one solid linebacker and a really good D-line, I'd rather that than having like 3 really good linebackers and a meh defensive line. You can get away with it, I guess, in some, it depends on what your scheme is and what you're doing, but I do like what they've done here with this defensive line. I'm not afraid of this linebacking core. I think the safety room is solid. I like what they did on the back end. So I think this defense could be very dangerous. Now, the problem is I'm not sure this head coach and GM make it through this year. And it's not because it's not a potent team. I think this defense is really good. I think they can win games if they, again, we've seen Daboll kind of scheme things up. We'll see what he ends up doing in this offseason with these quarterbacks and what they already have. So if they're able to start grinding it out and winning games, even if they win 21-18 or something, especially given that how good this defense looks like it should be on paper, I look at the opportunity for them to really win games that they're really underdogs in, very likely. On the other hand, though, they have, I think, one of the toughest schedules in the NFL this year. It's really hard finding a game for them to be truly favored in at all. Like, how many games, if you look at their schedule for the Giants, it does not look like they're going to be favored quite a bit in any game. It doesn't help their division's really good. You look at the Eagles, Super Bowl champs. You look at the Commanders, very much overperformed their first year. And, especially with a rookie QB who is very dynamic. And then you look at the Dallas Cowboys, who we'll talk about them, but like they've always been solid. Like like again, yeah, they lost Dan Quinn, and they're kind of in this weird turnover situation there, but their first year head coach was Schottenheimer. So if there's opportunity to kind of get over at least on a couple of these teams, I think there is opportunity there. A team like the Dallas Cowboys, they might be able to win shockingly against, especially if they're able to. Again, like they're going to have to eke out wins against teams that they are probably not very much favored with for this coaching staff and this GM. I think maybe more the coaching staff. I think weirdly enough, I'm more of a fan of Daboll than I am Schoen. There's even a story about Schoen about how he handled contracts in ESPN. I would go ahead and look that up. There was a back end of the roster player where he like threatened to cut him and asked him to take a pay cut, and it was just very, very weirdly done and very intimidating. And I think the way Schoen's handled contracts, I get you can maybe have your issues with Joe Schoen. I'm a big fan of Daboll, though. I think Mara has it the other way around. I think Mara looks at what Schoen has done and maybe looks at Daboll as like, hey, man, like, we gave you pieces. I understand maybe this isn't as talented a roster as when you came in, but this is your job. Figure it out. So I have concerns about the Giants. It's mostly this, like, again, but I think there's some excitement here. I do. I'm not sold on what Jackson Dart is as a quarterback in the NFL, but it didn't cost them much to get him. I do think we'll eventually see him play this year because at a certain point, you're going to have to start him if they're out of the playoffs. Listen, so much can happen. This is why, like, strength of schedule is always weird at this point because you don't know what happens. Players get injured, teams lose momentum. But I think it's going to be very hard for the Giants to eke out some momentum wins, and they better do it sooner rather than later because it's going to become a very long season and possibly some firings come up if the schedule ends up being very rough, if they have any major injuries, if they're not able to pass protect, if they're not able to score points. So the Giants, good luck.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous about the past and about the future.